So, many of you have heard this story before, but it's always good to hear things again. And I wanted to tell the story of when Mrs. Nichols came to face with an eruption. Ah! So picture it. Selah, Washington, May 1980. A young girl and her mother are headed to church. It's a Sunday morning. It's a beautiful, beautiful day. And as we're driving along, off to the distance to the west, we can see this really, really dark cloud. Now, first thing is, wow, that's a really nasty looking storm cloud. But the more we saw it, the more we thought, that doesn't really look like a storm cloud. Now, we had been hearing for many weeks up until this point that Mount St. Helens, one of the Cascade Mountains to the west of us, had been doing small little eruptions. And so as we were driving and looking at that black cloud, my mom says, I bet that mountain blew. So we get to church and we find out from people who'd been listening to the news that yes, Mount St. Helens had finally erupted, something it had been threatening to do for weeks before this. So we're far enough away. We're about 83 miles away from Mount St. Helens, so thinking it shouldn't impact us at all. But while we sat there at church, we've had big windows that faced off to the west. We could see that cloud coming closer and closer, and the whole sky, it was really weird because at one end you'd see nothing but black and then a beautiful blue sky. So it was really weird looking. But that cloud was coming, and at one point we see stuff falling out of the sky. So a friend of mine and I go outside and stand there, and I'm wearing this little white jacket, and all of this black, well, we found out, of course, it was ash from that eruption, was falling all over, and my mom's standing in the doorway of the church going, "Get back in here! You don't know what that's going to do." It turned my little jacket splotchy black. Maybe that was the beginning of when I started wearing black all the time. Anyway, so go back inside and the service starts and the sky just turns black, pitch black. There's lightning, thunder's rumbling. It was really, really crazy. So service was pretty quick because they knew that everyone should probably get home. And as Mom and I are driving back to our home in Selah, which would typically take maybe 15 minutes to get there, took us well over twice as long because as Mom was driving, she had to have the headlights on because it was just black. And it was so hard to see already. The road was covered in ash. And I'm still absolutely amazed that my mom was able to get us home safely because it was wild. Just to give you a sense of how close we were to this eruption, here's this poorly drawn map of Washington State. This is where we are now. And here's Mount Rainier, which is also a volcano. And there's about Mount St. Helens where it was. The smaller dot there above is Selah, where we lived. And the bigger dot was Yakima, where we went to church. And again, about 83 miles. We found out later that the big pyroclastic blast, the massive blast that just destroyed everything in its path, was only about 5 miles. Luckily, again, being 83 miles away, we just got dumped in that massive ash cloud. So that's the story of how Mrs. Nichols survived the eruption of Mount St. Helens, 1980.